As we go on with some of these lessons that I'd like to leave with you especially for those of you that are going to new hire training, or for that matter, anywhere in your flying career, um, I want to be able to give you an opportunity to ask questions or to communicate. And I want to leave this email address with you. That is one way that you can get in touch with me, contact me, where there might be some opportunity for some information to be shared. I realize some of this information, may at least start a process that you may have further questions about when it comes to techniques and to certain situations that maybe need a little bit more explanation. I'd essentially like to be able to be an instructor from a distance here. We can maybe even Zoom on some situations. But anyway, it'd start with a communication that you just send to this email address. One of the things I'd like to cover in this module, which I'll cover in more detail after you go through the next segment, is touchdown landing on the 737. As I mentioned a little bit later here, land this airplane consistently takes some techniques that work. There's a number of different techniques about landing Boeing aircraft. I am going to share two with you that for me and for others have been successful, but by all means that doesn't mean that there isn't other methods that work. But I also want to emphasize this. When you go through training, there just seems to be an acceptance that the simulator doesn't land like the airplane. I'd respectfully disagree with that. I think that it's a matter of technique of landing, and it is something that you can practice while you're going through training. And I'm going to cover a couple areas as you go through training, which is going to give you an opportunity to practice. Landings are something that you don't really get that much of during training. It's out there in the real world. And so I want to share with you some ways, some things that you can do during your training with the help, hopefully, of an instructor, so that you can get some practice on using not only these two techniques, but anything else that we're going to talk about is landing techniques on this airplane, because this airplane is not an easy airplane to land on a routine basis unless you have some specific techniques. I'll call them techniques because that's what they are. And there's a couple techniques that I'm going to cover with you that lead to really fairly consistent landings with this airplane, regardless of the conditions. And with this, what I want you to understand is that the airplane has aerodynamic condition. It has a certain gear configuration condition that kind of makes these landings a little bit more difficult. But two of the techniques I'm going to cover with you will assist with more consistent landings. The other thing that we're going to cover is crosswind landing techniques. Now, one of the things that I think is the weakest part of training programs that I've been associated with, there's so much information, there's so many maneuvers, so many things you have to do that you don't get a lot of practice with landings. Landings are essentially a couple times, most of the times you're making approaches and missed approaches, and out of some of those instrument approaches, you make landings. Now, I'm going to recommend and suggest, if you have an opportunity with an instructor, there certainly are ways, and I used to do this with my students, we can get through in a 30-minute period of time practicing these landings by using good simulator techniques. I'm putting you 300 feet out on final and over again, practicing some landings. Same with the crosswind landings. And you need to find time, and hopefully an instructor will be able to provide some of that for you. Another area that with this picture that we have right here, what I want to cover is the first technique. Now, notice here, we do have the autopilot engaged, which you probably wouldn't have at this point making a visual landing. But what I want to do is to, number one, bring out, constantly be cross-checking, even though you're making a visual landing here. be visual, be inside here and cross-check how you're doing on the glide slope. And although, you know, as a first officer, when you go through training, your picture is going to be over on the right side. It's exactly the same of what we're looking at here on the primary flight display. The other thing I really want you to get used to is, and we'll cover an awful lot more about this in many of the other sessions here, is to be on this econ descent page as a flying pilot when you're making an approach and landing. But let's get back to a landing technique. Now, the first one, and probably the one that is used by most people, is once you get down into this area, you've heard a 100-foot call. Now, another point that I want to emphasize, and this is very sloppy in training, and you get away with it, but it's a bad habit to get into. Whether it's an instrument approach or a visual approach, your touchdown zone is here in this block right here. Work to touchdown in that touchdown zone from 1,000 foot down to 1,500 feet. Make sure that you work hard and use that as part of your discipline of landing, that is your target. Now, certainly various runway conditions, various runway lengths may modify that. We'll talk about some of those things here, but that's a little bit unusual. In most cases, you're going to be easily, under most weather conditions, be able to land in this touchdown zone. There's no excuse for not. If that doesn't happen, then just recognize it, don't accept it, and work harder on the next one. Now with that, when you get down into this area, again, getting back to the technique, instead of looking here in this area real close to where the touchdown zone is, or close just over the glare shield here, start to take your focus, keep that approach going in its normal manner, but start to take your focus down the runway. Your eye contact, your eye focus is down here rather than here. For some strange reason, the brain and all the other faculties that are involved in this process, this makes for consistently smoother landings when your visual cue is out down the runway. Now, I would say maybe make it, you know, halfway, somewhere down in that area, or a little bit longer. I mean, you decide what works for you. But don't focus in this area of a touchdown. You're in the gate. As you can look at your instrumentation here, keep that approach going the way it is. And instead of trying to focus close in the area of the touchdown zone, just take your view, your eye view, and take it out here down the runway. And you'll find that you really make more consistent landings under those conditions. Now, the second technique that I want to cover with you, we're going to, again, pick up at this same position, but this is going to require a little bit of your involvement, your actual physical involvement. But when I say that, there is going to be a slight physical move that you will make, or a relaxation move you make as you get down here a little bit further. The principle behind this is that when you get down into the area of 10 feet and below, what you want to do is just do a little bit, I call it a bump. And that bump is not anything that you aggressively do. You just even maybe relax the back pressure that you have on the yoke, and just anticipate that what you want to do is make the main landing gear rise up just slightly in that last 10 feet so that the gear is not moving down to the runway at the same rapid rate. And that little bit of a bump, which is an old Boeing technique, just really makes for a smooth landing, and it makes for a landing in that touchdown zone or that aim point a lot easier. So I'm going to continue this down to a point where you're going to make this effort. Now listen, gang, what you want to do is practice this in your training in a simulator. When you all go off into your own little training sessions without an instructor, just practice these things. Go out to 300 feet and over again. Practice these landing techniques. Get them down. But this little bump maneuver, if you decide you like that and that works well for you, it's a great technique for landing a Boeing airplane. So what we're going to do is move down a little bit further here with this, and I'll show you at the point where you're going to make this little maneuver. Now this system does not have a cause system in it such that we have an aural sound, but notice here we're at 16 feet above the runway radio altimeter. Now when you hear 10, when it says 10, that's the time you just make a little, relax the back pressure on the yoke, or just give it a almost infinitesimal move forward, just a little bit of a pip forward, and move that gear up rather than flaring it into the runway, and you'll find you're going to have some really nice smooth landings, especially for a Boeing aircraft. So when you get down to this point here, you want to be just relaxing that back pressure so that you don't want the nose to touch first. You're not being that aggressive. What you're doing is just relaxing where the main landing gear are not being rotated into the runway, but in fact have a little bit of movement away from the runway as it continues in its descent to touchdown. I hope this makes sense. I'm going to repeat it. What you want to do is take and relax the pressure or bump it slightly such that the landing gear is not continuing to rotate into with a flare, rotate into the runway, but what it's doing is kind of, it's not coming down at the same rate such that the main landing gear are not being rotated into the runway, but they're being stable, or what they're being is maybe a slight lift movement, but you're certainly not rotating the nose gear down to the runway. It's not that aggressive. It's just a very little simple bump or relaxation. Practice it in the simulator. I think you'll have fun with it, and I think you'll find that it can be very successful. But notice here too, gang, when you do this kind of mover, rather than doing your flaring, some of us start to flare at 30 feet, at 20 feet, or going way, way down the runway. Flaring this airplane kind of has a lot of nuisances that it can create. Number one, not landing in the touchdown zone. Number two, floating well down the runway. Number three, it sometimes is some landings you wish you didn't make. Okay, hopefully this is some information that will help you. Again, if you have any questions at any time, just email me. Good luck. Hey folks, thank you for watching this module. I just want to apologize a little bit here too, because you know what I did with this, I had to chop up some other sessions that I had and made this a bit sketchy and uneasy in some of the transitions, so I apologize for that. But the one thing I want you to know that with some of this future module information, there won't be this kind of interactions that I have to make between some previous lessons and putting it together in a continual format here. We'll improve on that in the future. But here's the other thing that I want to really start to cover and emphasize is situational awareness. Now, I noticed as I made this that there is something that your situational awareness ought to pick up that is a problem in the video portion with the airplane in position on the final part of the approach and landing. I want you to see if you can discover what that is. I'm not going to mention what it is, but I want to see if you can pick up, as you scan the entire cockpit, picked up something that a situational awareness mind would pick up. And I hope you picked it up during watching this rather than having to go back and look for it. But we're going to emphasize a lot of new things about situational awareness in the future. So there's a situation in this particular video where you can see that should be very definitely noticed. It would have been noticed a lot earlier than at that point on the final approach. Okay, everybody, God bless and good luck. Have fun and enjoy this new toy that you have an opportunity to fly.